I say the word apple, and you might think of a delicious fruit, or maybe an ambitious CEO. I say the word apple once more, but this time I say it to a Spokane Native American. He pictures a trader. The trader appears to be red-skinned at first glance, but on the inside he is as white as can be.
Hey, Victor!
You ain't shit, you f***ing apple.
Alexi, page 2. It's clear that one of the themes of Sherman Alexi's novel is that segregation in history between the Native Americans and whites perpetuate tension between the two groups. In the novel, Native Americans blame white people for some systemic problems which exist in Native reservations, and likewise, white people in the novel are illustrated ridiculing and discriminating against the Native Americans in chapters discussing the disrespectful white amusement park tourists and the 7-Eleven night shift worker feeling irrationally afraid of brown customers. To me, the power of Sherman Alexi's narrative comes with the idea that he never explicitly points out this racism. Rather, he illustrates the racial conflicts between natives and whites using other unspoken methods. The movie Smoke Signals is what most people consider to be the film adaptation of Sherman Alexi's 1993 novel, The Lone Ranger and Tonto Fistfight in Heaven. Featuring a selection of prominent characters from the text, including Victor, his mother and father, and Thomas Builds the Fire, the film opens with a scene illustrating Thomas being ejected from a burning home. He narrates in the background, giving context, explaining the tragedy of his parents' deaths.
My mother and father celebrated white people's independence by holding the largest house party in Coeur d'Alene tribal history. I mean, every Indian in the world was there. And then at 3 a.m, after everyone had passed out or fallen asleep on couches, on chairs, on beds, on the floor, a fire rose up like General George Armstrong Custer and swallowed up my mother and father. I don't remember that fire. I only have the stories, and in every one of those stories, I could fly.
The juxtaposition of Thomas's explicit mention of the Native American celebration of white people's independence and his mention of the catastrophe of his house burning down is the perfect example of unspoken blame. Thomas is adding to the notion that the presence of white people in a Native American land is always followed by disaster. My suspicion of his accusation is affirmed by his inclusion of General Custer, who is notorious for breaking Native American treaties and slaughtering Indians. This unspoken, low-key blame is mirrored in the novel on page 34, when Victor discusses how white men have been abandoning their children forever, and now Native American men do the same exact thing. Victor's discussion of cultural assimilation is not an explicit jab at white people. Like the movie scene, this excerpt shows how juxtaposition of two statements can be as insulting and accusational as something delivered more bluntly. Let's examine another scene from the film.
Indians ain't supposed to smile like that. Get stoic. No, like this. You gotta look mean or people won't respect you. White people will run all over you if you don't look mean. You gotta look like a warrior. You gotta look like you just came back from killing a buffalo.
But our tribe never hunted buffalo. We were fishermen.
What? You wanna look like you just came back from catching a fish?
Victor never explicitly tells Thomas about antagonizing white people. It's more like Victor is acknowledging the history of white people dominating and conquering Native Americans. He uses the phrase, run all over you, to describe his fear of the threat of white people overpowering and taking advantage of Indians, and he commands Thomas to look mean in order to counter this threat. He continues by inspiring Thomas to embrace the warrior culture and to try to look like a hunter. Here, Victor is encouraging Thomas to flaunt his Indian pride in order to disassociate from white America. It seems clear then that Victor is embracing the divide between white culture and Native American culture, and he's dismissing the possibility of compromise. Perhaps Victor feels powerless, like compromise isn't even a possibility. In Sherman Alexie's book, this notion is strengthened when Victor expresses how scared he is of white people. Victor recalls on page 55, "We sat there beside Dirty Joe, and we watched all the white tourists watch us, laugh, point a finger, their faces twisted with hate and disgust. I was afraid of all of them. I wanted to hide behind my Indian teeth." The quick joke. Contributing to his stubborn attitude is Victor's feeling of being powerless and scared amidst what he sees as a hateful white world. Even the title of the book itself is a hidden yet obvious comment on racial conflict. The Lone Ranger and Tonto is an iconic duo which appears in a lot of 20th century pieces of literature, on radio shows, and even on television. The Lone Ranger is a white vigilante who fights outlaws and brings them to justice, and Tonto is his Native American sidekick, often depicted as his best friend. It becomes clear then that Alexie is defying this reality by suggesting that the Lone Ranger is actually fistfighting with Tonto, something loyal partners would never do. By painting this paradox, we see that Alexie feels that the relationship between natives and whites is not black and white, and that we have to examine the true lifestyles and interactions of these people groups at a new angle. People want to believe that a compromise has been reached, but in actuality, these friends may never truly appreciate one another. For practical and artistic reasons, though, Alexie chooses not to use a different title for his book, such as "The White Boy Yells Racial Slurs at a Native American in Heaven." Now, let's slice open an apple again. Notice this time that the flesh is still white. Pay a little more attention and mind the seeds at the core. They're still red, aren't they? We can observe that the flesh, exposed to air, over time is also gaining a reddish tint. The problem is that we have to invest a good amount of time to actually notice this. We have to be knowledgeable to know about the fruit's chemistry, about its oxidation process. In Sherman Alexie's book, there is a purposeful dismissal of this investment of time. Perhaps unintentionally, natives and whites would rather perpetuate the hateful relationship than sit down to settle their differences. So when we analyze a sliced apple, we start to ponder, who said color has to matter?